Hello and welcome. Hello,
Hi.
hello. Good afternoon, right? Or
Hi.
it depends on the country you're from. Good. Well, with your approval, we would like to officially open this webinar session. For those of you with which I haven't met so far, I would like to introduce myself. I am Luisa Anzolin, and I'm a community manager at SeedBlink. And together with my colleague Andrei Hancu, General Counsel in our team, we are hosting this community Q&A session, which is a webinar series that we started out of the feedback that we received from the community, namely to try and explain more some concepts that apply for the community of investors that we have at SeedBlink. So I would like to thank you again, Andrei, for accepting my invitation. And for
Thank you so much for inviting me.
It was a very easy choice because I knew you were the proper man to do that tonight with us. And without further ado, I would like to again wish you welcome. And Andrea, I would invite you to share with us a couple words about you and about your activity. Yeah, we are going to be here for the entire session, and for all the questions you might have, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will answer to them one by one. Thank you. Andrei.
Thank you, Luisa. Okay, so hi all, my name is Andrei Hancu. I'm General Counsel with SeedBlink. I'm a lawyer. Specialized mainly in corporate and M&A matters with a special focus on private equity deals. So I'm not gonna bore you anymore with what I do. I think this is good enough. So what I would like to talk about tonight is equity and convertible instruments. I'm sure you've heard about both terms, equity and convertible, and I'm pretty sure that you know what they are. Mainly. But there are a couple of things that actually arise from questions. We had a lot of questions from investors, and we thought it would be just easier to make a community Q&A and try to answer them. So without further ado, because it's a lot of information, let's go into it. Okay. So let's start on the top. Before talking about equity on convertible instruments, we need to go a little back and talk about startup funding rounds. And you're gonna see that there are two main types of funding rounds. We have priced rounds and we have unpriced rounds. Well, the name is pretty self-explanatory. Priced rounds means that the round has a price. What price? A price per share. This is the PPS. When you see PPS in the presentation, it's price per share. This is the classic abbreviation. So the priced rounds have this price per share. The price per share comes, of course, from the valuation of the company. So in all priced rounds, there is a clear valuation of the company. However, at unpriced round, we don't have a company valuation. This is very important to remember because you'll see that we will talk about valuation caps in the next couple of slides. But you need to understand that there is no company valuation at an unpriced round. Therefore, there is no price per share. So for priced rounds, we have a clear transaction at the time of the investment. You're buying X number of shares for an amount. With unpriced rounds, you don't actually know how much equity you will be purchasing. You don't know how many shares you will have eventually, because there is no price per share. There is no price. But the unpriced rounds have no price whatsoever, but you cannot buy something without knowing the price, right? So what you know is how you will determine this price in the future. It's not a determined price, it's a determinable price. So in unpriced rounds, we have mechanisms in place in order to determine the price per share and the timing of the future equity transaction. things will become clearer as we progress through the slides. Don't worry if things are not really clear right now. The point is that everybody knows is that investors always want equity. Equity equals shares. They always want shares in the company they are investing in, right? Because otherwise, why are we giving money? We as investors, we're not banks. We're not giving money to get an interest in return. We're giving money to have a participation in the company. The participation in the company is called equity, so we need shares in that company. So one of the first questions which comes into mind is, why do unpriced rounds exist in the first place if there are no shares issued? So let's see why. Well, unpriced rounds, as I said, the price, what is the price? Because we never said what this is. The price comes from the valuation, and the valuation needs to be negotiated. Who is negotiating the valuation? The lead investor. This is why they are called lead investors, because they take this burden of negotiating the valuation of the company with a startup, and the other investors in the round just benefit from this negotiation. Of course, if they believe that the price is right. So in order to have a price, you need to have a company valuation. But in order to establish a company valuation and do a priced round, you need to hit some certain company milestones. According to what? Well, according to the investment thesis of the lead investor. For example, if the lead investor is a venture capital firm, a venture capital fund, this venture capital fund, for example, may say in the investment thesis that they only invest in companies which have minimum 50K recurring revenue per month. This is in the investment thesis. Maybe I have 40,000 per month. I don't have 50,000 yet. So this means that I'm not eligible to receive funding from such VC fund. So this means that maybe I cannot do a priced round because I didn't hit the company milestones yet. But I believe that in the near future, I will hit them. However, in order to hit these milestones, to be able to get money from the VC I talk to and the VC who likes my business, I still have some work to do. So I need some money, some investment money. So this is where unpriced rounds come to help the startup and to help the investors. You'll see why immediately. So basically, unpriced rounds may take place in two main scenarios. As the first round for a startup, where the startup uses the money in order to reach the necessary milestones in order to get an investment from a VC fund, or as a bridge round. A bridge round, again, is pretty self-explanatory, is a bridge between two priced rounds. For example, in 2020, I got a price round in the amount of 2 million euros at a 6 million valuation. And the runway for the money I got for that 1 million, the runway ends in March 2023. So I need in March 2023 to raise another round. But let's say that maybe I miscalculated a little bit and the runway ends earlier. The runway ends now. So I have 1 month gap, which I need to fill with some money. So then again, I can raise an unpriced round until I can raise the next price round, because I still have some milestones to hit, but I run out of money. I need a fast infusion of capital from investors, and therefore I raise this so-called unpriced round, because I don't have a price yet for the next round. The next round will be priced and the company will be valuated by the lead investor as soon as I hit those company milestones. So what is important to remember right here is that the unpriced rounds are always related to a future priced round. Because in the unpriced round, the startup raises money before that priced round, because it needs some money to hit that priced round. So basically, when we as investors participate in an unpriced round, is the same, just imagine this, is the same as getting shares in the following priced round, but with money in advance. I give the money now, I receive the shares later. When in the priced round, because shares are always issued in priced rounds, not in unpriced rounds. Okay, so now we understand why there are unpriced rounds. Now the next question is, okay, why would I pay money now for shares to be received in the future priced round? Why just not wait for a couple of months when the priced round exists and I just invest in that equity round? Because priced rounds are also called equity rounds. Well, basically, investors have different incentives. Because we as investors give money before the price round, usually mean that we are taking a bigger risk. Why? Because there is no clear valuation of the company, there is no lead investor in the picture yet. And this is why we need some incentives to do this. And there are mainly three types of incentives. We have interest, which is only applicable to convertible loan agreements. We'll see in a couple of slides that there are a couple of convertible instruments, and we'll talk about that. But you need to remember that interest is only applicable for CLA. So basically, it's like a loan. We are giving the startup a loan because it's not a priced round, and we have some interest applied. We may have some interest applied. Then we have a valuation cap, which is the maximum company valuation to be considered when we calculate the price per share, because we still need a price to do a price round. And we also have a discount. Okay, so let's talk about these incentives. So what is the valuation cap? Let's say that the startup is planning to do a price round, an equity round, at a valuation of 6 million. This is their plan. It won't necessarily happen at 6 million because they don't have a valuation yet, but they expect to raise the next round at 6 million. So they need to decide, along with the investors, what valuation cap to put in. The valuation cap is the maximum valuation that we, the investors who participate in the unpriced round, take into account. So for example, if the valuation cap is 6 million, yeah, because they are expecting to do the round at 6 million. So the valuation cap is 6 million. But maybe the round, they will negotiate better with the lead investor and the round happens at 7 million valuation. This means that for me, as an investor who invested in the unpriced round, this means that I'm putting money at a valuation equal to 6 million, at the valuation cap. I don't care what valuation is taken into account for the equity round. This is not my problem. I have the valuation cap in mind. With the valuation cap, there also comes a discount. The discount is the discount applied to the price per share in the equity round. So let's say that the price per share in the equity round is 100 euros per share. Everybody in the equity round is putting money at 100 euros per share. Because I paid the money earlier, maybe a couple months earlier, maybe a year earlier, I have a discount, which usually is somewhere between 15 and 25%. This is what I've seen in my experience. So I'm actually getting more shares than the investors participating in the equity round. Usually, most convertible instruments have both types of incentives, valuation cap and discount. And the way this works is that I, as an investor, have the right to choose what is better for me. For example, if the valuation cap is 6 million and the equity round happens at 10 million, I'm way better taking into account the valuation cap because I'm receiving shares at a price per share of 6 million divided by the company capitalization instead of 10 million. So it's way better for me to take the valuation cap into account. However, it may happen that the valuation cap is bigger than it should be. So maybe the valuation cap is 10 million and the round happens at 6 million. So then I receive more shares if I take into account the discount. So I look at the price per share in the equity round, what price are the investors paying, and I apply the discount, let's say 25%. So this is how this works. This is all either valuation cap or discount. It's not cumulative. It's never cumulative. You cannot accumulate this. So whatever it is that results in the lowest PPS, price per share, for the investor. So all this is designed to reward investors who've taken the bigger risk of putting money into a company without having a clear valuation. So what needs to be underlined here is that valuation is not equal to valuation cap. Valuation is the price of the company, is a price. Valuation cap is just a means of determining the price in the future. So it's not the same. When you see a deal, a convertible note or a safe, for example, which states valuation cap 10 million, the company does not have a valuation of 10 million. It's only a valuation cap, which is only used in order to determine the price in the future round. Again, if the valuation of the company is lower than the valuation cap, then I will go with a discount. If it's higher than the valuation cap, I will go with the valuation cap. Okay, so now we understand the different types of rounds, unpriced versus priced rounds. So different types of rounds require different types of instruments. So priced rounds, also called equity rounds, means that investors are getting shares at a very specific price per share, based, of course, on the valuation of the company. Unpriced rounds, for unpriced rounds, we use convertible instruments. Why are they called convertible? Because they are convertible into future equity. So I'm not getting shares now, but I expect to do so in the future. So what these convertible instruments actually does, it's a contract, by the way. Legally speaking, it's a contract. It's a contract establishing the rules for how I will convert the money I pay now into shares in the future price round. So price rounds have a price per share, meaning that the process is straightforward. I pay the money, I get equity immediately. In unpriced rounds, there is no valuation, there is no price per share, and this means that I will get equity at a later date, but for a better price per share. This is the deal. I give the money now, I receive equity later, but for a better price. So basically, this convertible instrument states the rules for how the amounts are converted into shares. Because again, this is what I want as an investor. I don't want the money back. I don't want the interest. I want shares. On the other hand, equity is again straightforward. We have the price round, we have the price per share. Price per share is calculated according to the company's valuation. But how? The formula is pretty simple. Price per share is company valuation, let's say 5 million, 6 million, 10 million, divided by the company capitalization. Well, the company capitalization is maybe a little bit harder to understand, but I will try to do my best to explain this in easier terms. Basically, company capitalization means the total number of shares issued and outstanding. I left outstanding specifically out of this presentation because it's a US specific term. It doesn't really apply to what we're doing at SeedBlink. Assuming exercise of all outstanding options, like stock option plans, for example, warrants, or whatever other convertible securities. So this means what in practice? Let's say that the company has issued 1,000 shares. This is all they have. They have 1,000 shares. They have no stock option plan. They have no other convertible securities. They have nothing else. This is all they have, 1,000 issued shares, out of which, let's say one founder has 500, the other founder has 500, 50-50, 1,000 shares. So the price per share is straightforward right now. It's 1 million, let's say company valuation, divided by 1,000, which according to my calculations would be 100,000. I'm a lawyer, I'm not necessarily good at math. So the point is that I have to take into account the issued shares, but we may have the situation where I have 1,000 issued shares, but I have some safe notes or convertible notes, which are not yet converted into shares. So I need to take into account also those shares, as it's called, the Americans say, as an on-converted basis. So it means that I'm imagining that these convertibles have been actually converted into shares, and I'm taking that amount of shares into account because it's bigger and it results in a lower price per share. So in the price round, the investor becomes a shareholder in the startup. This means what? When I become a shareholder as an investor, I get all the rights incumbent to shareholders. This means preemption right. I have preemption, also called the follow-on right. I have the right to put some more money in future equity rounds. Maybe I get anti-dilution. Maybe I get a down round protection, meaning that in case of a future round happens at a lower valuation than the previous round, I get some extra shares. So it will be as if I've put the money in the first value, in the lower valuation, at the lower valuation. Information rights. Again, information rights are for shareholders. Companies don't have a legal obligation to give information rights to people outside the company. And when I'm investing in an unpriced round, I'm not a shareholder. I'm outside of the company. I'm just a creditor from a legal perspective. I'm just someone who loaned them some money. So just to make a short thing here, when I say shareholder, when participating in equity rounds on SeedBlink platform, you as investors are indirect shareholders of startup. You're not direct shareholders because we use SPVs, or as you will see in the near future, we use the trust company as an SPV for this kind of deals. So you're not a shareholder directly into the company, you're an indirect shareholder. On the other hand, we have convertible instruments, which again are related to unpriced rounds, which means you are paying money upfront for future equity. The advantage is, of course, a lower price per share in the future round. And we are paying money upfront based on this convertible instrument and the rules in the convertible instrument. Again, the convertible instrument is a contract. So basically what I'm doing is I will be receiving equity shares based on money paid upfront. And this is called a conversion. So I give now 100,000 euros, and this is all I have. I have paid 100,000 euros. I don't have shares yet. I'm not a shareholder yet. I'm just a creditor who has a debt of 100,000 euros. So in the future, this amount will be converted. How? I need a price, right, in order to convert. This is why I was telling you earlier that unpriced rounds are always related to priced rounds, because eventually I will need a price. I will need a price per share in order to determine how many shares I will get. So what I care about is the price per share at conversion. Therefore, it's pretty straightforward. The conversion may only happen at a later priced round. So how is the PPS, the price per share at conversion, calculated? Well, it's according to those incentives I mentioned earlier, the valuation cap or the discount. What I'm doing is I usually calculate both. I'm calculating a price per share according to a valuation cap and another one according to the discount. And I try to determine which is better for me as an investor, because that is what most of the times, actually all the times, the convertible instruments say that the investor has the right to choose from the valuation cap or the discount, whichever is better for him. Of course, there are convertible instruments having only valuation cap and only discount. I personally didn't encounter them until now, but everything is possible. It's according to the negotiation between the investors and the stock. So again, in an unpriced round, the investor does not become a shareholder in the startup. Therefore, he does not benefit from any rights incumbent to shareholders. However, sometimes when negotiating these types of deals, the investor says, okay, but I want to give you money in an unpriced round. I understand the mechanism, I will get equity later. But maybe I want a preemption right. Maybe in the next price round, I want to put some more money. or okay, I give you some money, but I don't care that I'm not an investor, I'm not a shareholder yet. I want to have some information rights, or maybe I want to have a down round protection. I need to know that in the future I will have some rights. So there is an instrument called a side letter, usually. And this is why it's a side letter and it's not in the convertible instrument itself, because maybe you negotiate some things with one investor, maybe we negotiate something with other investors. Maybe if you put 10,000, you have some rights. If you put 1 million, you have other rights. So this is why it's separate. But the side letter specifically says that you will have, for example, a preemption right in the next price round, or you will have information rights, or you will have whatever other rights you will have, because you will eventually become a shareholder. So now, what's the next question is, what if a price round never happens? I mean, all we discussed until now, we said that the unpriced round is always related to a future price round. But what happens if I pay 100,000 euros right now in an unpriced round? I'm waiting for the price round to happen, but it never happens. Because again, it's a startup, it's a risk that we're taking here. So it may never happen at all. So this is why we need to have some mechanism in place to determine what happens if the price round never happens or the startup gets sold before the conversion.
Andrei,
yes.
I was wondering if we can try and answer the two questions that we already received.
Yeah,
because yeah, maybe they could be integrated into the presentation. So we were asked, when do you decide to include or not a discount rate for a safe, and what are the main reasons for it in both cases? And the same member asked us, how do you decide the valuation cap for a startup that has no revenue yet?
Okay, so let's start with the first question. When you put discount and when you put valuation cap, these things are purely negotiable. So when a startup goes to an investor and says, look, I'm planning to do a price round in the next 6 months, I just need 500,000 euros to get to those milestones, they negotiate. Usually, those convertible instruments have both valuation cap and discount. But according to the specifics, maybe they just have 1 more month to go and they don't want to give a valuation cap, or maybe they do want to give a valuation cap, but it's the same as the valuation. So it's not really an incentive for the investor. So they only give a discount of 5% because it's happening in 1 month, or they give a discount of 25% because they don't know when it will happen. Maybe in 6 months, maybe in 8 months. The point is that usually you have a maturity date, which means that, which again is negotiable. Everything is negotiable with the startup. You have a maturity date, which says that we have 2 years, so 1 year in which the next round will happen. And we will talk in the next slide what happens if it doesn't. So basically what I'm trying to say is that everything is negotiable. So there is no rule when to put in valuation cap, when to put in discount. What investors want and what we at SeedBlink push for the investors to get is both valuation cap and discount. We care about both of them because we have a better leverage. If the valuation cap is too low, then okay, we're going to the valuation cap. If the valuation cap is too big comparing to the valuation of the company, then we'll go to the discount. The next question, how do you decide on the valuation cap? Well, this is like asking, how do you decide on the valuation? If they have no revenue, then they are expecting to have revenue. And it's the startup's job to convince the investors that they are worth an amount. But remember that this is an unpriced round. We're talking about an unpriced round. We're talking about a valuation cap. A valuation cap is not a valuation. So you have much more wiggle room in this respect, because it doesn't actually matter. You can have a valuation cap of 100 million euros and the next round can be done at 1 million. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that it matters. I mean, it doesn't really matter for the investor as long as he also has a discount. But it matters for the startup, because what they don't want to do, they don't want to have a very low valuation cap. Because if the next round happens at a bigger round, at a bigger valuation, that means they get dissoluted a little bit more. So they will have less equity because we will rely on the valuation cap if the valuation is bigger, and then we will get more shares than if we would have gotten in the equity round, and their equity gets lower in the company. So hopefully I have answered the questions.
If any other explanations are needed, just write in the chat and we are here. And we also received a third question,
Yes.
if I may, Andrei.
Yes.
How often is the valuation cap set in a convertible note an indicator of the actual valuation that the investor participating in the price round will use as the company's valuation?
Okay, so I think it's more or less the same question. The point is that usually when you're deciding on a valuation cap, you're taking into most of the times you already have some discussions with VCs, for example, or with lead investors. Doesn't matter if it's not a VC. You already have a discussion on the future equity round. You go to the VC and say, okay, I didn't hit the milestones yet for you to invest in me, but I plan to do so in the next 6 months. So let's say that I hit them. Let's discuss some valuations. Let's discuss something. So you have a ballpark. You know where you are. I mean, you're not expecting to raise an equity round at a valuation of 10 million if the discussions with the VC are around 6 or 7. So more or less, you know what to expect. Even if you don't have revenue, you look into the market, you look at other companies, maybe with no valuation, who raised some money, and you look at them and you say, okay, they use the valuation cap of 5 million. Maybe I will use the same. So this is the point, that founders don't want to get diluted. This is, by the way, the word I was looking for earlier. So they won't get diluted. This is their biggest fear, that if they have a very, very low valuation cap, they will get very much diluted. Imagine what happens if you put a valuation cap of 1 million and you raise the round at 10 million. You will actually get those shares 10 times cheaper than the other investors, which means they get diluted a lot for the same money. So hopefully this becomes a little more clear as we progress along this presentation. Okay, so what happens if a price round never happens in the future, or the startup gets sold before conversion? As I said, the convertible instrument is a legal agreement. This means that we have legal provisions stating what happens in this exact case. So there are some remedies available, usually at the investor's option. So the investor wants to have complete discretion on what to do in case the next price round doesn't happen until the maturity date. So what you can do as an investor is postpone the maturity date. Maybe the startup comes and says, okay, I said 12 months, but tomorrow I'm signing the term sheet with the VC. So then you as an investor say, okay, I will postpone another month or another 2 months until you get the deal done with the next lead investor. However, you can come to the conclusion that the price round is not going to happen for another year or so. So this is where you can convert the amounts into equity at a pre-agreed price per share. And this is called the floor valuation. We have a valuation cap which goes upwards. It means the maximum company valuation where I will put the money in. But I also have a floor valuation, which means it's a minimum. As I was saying, in order to get shares, I need to have a price. If the price round never happens, well, this basically means that I will never have a price. This is why we are taking into account this so-called floor valuation. So in worst case scenario that the next round never happens, I still have a price. Usually, the floor valuation is the valuation from the last round. So if I did a round last year with a price per share of 100 euros, and I'm planning to do the next round at the price per share of 200 euros, maybe I will put a valuation cap according to that 200 euros price per share, and I'm putting a floor valuation according to the 100 euros price per share. So this means that worst case scenario, the round doesn't happen in the foreseeable future, maybe in the one year month. The investors are not, you don't want to give money to a company and receive nothing. You want to receive the equity as soon as possible. So the ideal scenario is that you give the money right now, and in 5-6 months, the price round happens. So in case it doesn't happen into maturity date and there is no foreseeable deal in the future, you can convert this to the floor valuation. Of course, most convertible notes and most convertible notes you'll see in the next slide why, you also have, as an investor, the option of reimbursement of the amounts. This is basically worded like if a round doesn't happen in the next 6 months or 1 year, then I can decide between converting the amounts at the pre-agreed floor valuation or getting the money back. The thing is that this is not really useful. I mean, it's present. I've seen it in a lot of convertible notes and in a lot of convertible instruments, but it's not really useful because the way a startup works is you give the money, they actually need the money to spend it, and until you realize as an investor that the next round won't happen quickly, they already spend the money, so they won't have any money to reimburse, to give back to the investors. So this is why this is not really useful, and what is useful is converting the amounts at the floor valuation, because you are getting to, you are becoming a shareholder, and okay, maybe they hit a bottleneck. It didn't happen in the agreed time frame, in the agreed 12 months maturity date, but maybe it happens in the next year or so. And if it happens in the next year or so, you'll be very happy you converted at the floor valuation because you got some shares at a very, very low price. So basically, we have the notion of trigger event. This is when the conversion happens. The amounts that we're giving in an unpriced round convert at a trigger event. The trigger event may be a qualified investment round. This is the next price round. This is what I'm referring to. And why it's called a qualified investment round? Because in the contract, in the convertible instrument, you need to decide what qualifies as an investment round. Maybe he's getting 50,000 euros from an angel investor. Is that an investment round? Maybe yes, maybe no. Always you have to decide which is the minimum amount. And you define, for example, that a qualified investment round, when the conversion happens, is 500,000 euros or 1 million or whatever they are targeting here. The trigger event can also be maturity date. If the qualified investment round has not happened yet until maturity date, I have the possibility to convert at the floor valuation. And another trigger event may be the liquidity event, because until now, we only talked about the situation in which the next equity round never happens. But other things may happen in the meantime, like a liquidity event. What's a liquidity event? In plain English, the startup gets sold. Usually, what it means for a company to get sold, it means that a change of control has to happen, which means that at least half of the shares are getting acquired by a third party. This is what we call a liquidity event. And in case of a liquidity event, the investors who invested by means of convertible instrument don't receive any shares. They receive a payout instead of shares. And how this works is that the payout is usually, most of the times, calculated and operated as a virtual conversion just before the liquidity event, which basically says that if you sold the company right now, let's assume that you didn't sell it until now, I convert my note or my convertible instrument, I convert it, again, according to the valuation cap or according to the discount. For example, in the liquidity event, maybe an institutional investor comes and they buy the company, buy 51% of the shares for 100 euros per share. This is the price of the transaction. That means that I can calculate, going backwards, I can calculate the company valuation at which this transaction has taken place. So again, I can use either the valuation cap or the discount to see which is better for me as an investor. And why do I say a virtual conversion? That is because this usually don't convert. Actually, there are two types of liquidity events, because usually when it's a change of control, the institutional investor don't want the other investors holding notes in the company anymore. So this is why the notes usually, and all convertible instruments I've seen, contain this clause stating that in case 50% plus one of the company gets sold, you get liquidated, according, of course, to the valuation cap and discount. So, for example, if the liquidity event happens at a very good price, you will get some very good money. Of course, if it doesn't happen at a very good price, you will most likely get the discount. And this is actually what happened with the Sanopas investment, because I'm sure you will mention it eventually, so I will do it for you. What happened over there is that a couple of investors had invested in the equity round, and they had a very good return. But other investors invested via a safe note in the company. So this is exactly what happened. This was a liquidity event, because when Sanopas was sold, more than 50% of the company's shares had been sold to the institutional investor. So this meant that, according to the safe, this was a liquidity event. And in case the liquidity event, you actually got the discount. This was the deal. And after the successful negotiations, our investors got a little more than the discount, not just the discount. They got a little more than they actually deserved based on those safes. So this is what happens in these two scenarios. If the next equity round doesn't happen, or the startup gets sold. Of course, there is a third scenario, but it's not worth talking about, the scenario in which the company gets liquidated, dissoluted. It's not doing well, it gets closed. Well, it's pretty straightforward what happens. It doesn't matter if you're an equity investor or if you're invested by a convertible note, will eventually get nothing. This is the risk of being an investor. So now I talked about convertible instruments, and I want to highlight some key differences between three types of convertible instruments, which are mostly used. We have the CLA, which is the convertible loan agreement. The convertible loan agreement, as the name says and suggests, it's a loan agreement. You're giving out a loan. But it's not a simple loan. It's a loan with a mechanism for converting the debt, the loan itself, into equity, into shares. It is the only instrument that may bear interest. The interest, by the way, how it usually works is that I say, okay, I give you 100,000 euros, which an interest of 5% per year, compounded, which means that at the moment of conversion, I calculate the main amount, the main investment amount, and the interest when I convert. So I get both interest and some shares. But in practice, it doesn't usually work like this. I mean, in order not to be, investors do not really care about that interest. They care about the shares. They care about getting shares cheaper. And this is the only thing you should care of as an investor. So it doesn't usually work like this. Usually the interest is only applicable in case of an event of default. Again, the convertible loan agreement is a little more complex compared to safes and ASAs. But this is actually a good thing, because it contains explicit mechanism of what happens in case a pledged round fails to happen until the maturity date. Exactly what I was talking about earlier. And it's a debt instrument. On the other hand, the SAFE, which I'm sure you've heard about, which stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity. This is basically an instrument issued by Y Combinator. It's a standard. It's a standard for a convertible instrument which has been extensively used in the past, not so much anymore, because the whole point of this safe was to throw money at startups. This safe appeared in the period where everybody was throwing money around. It didn't really matter. It was a startup. It sounded cool. Investors were throwing money at them. So the safe was invented for a sole purpose, giving money as easy as possible to a startup. So this is why it's way simpler. It's usually a 3-pager. But because it's simpler and it was drafted in a period where investors didn't think about risks, everything was doing great, the market was doing great, everybody was happy, it does not even contain a maturity date. So the standard safe does not have a maturity date. This means that if a next equity round doesn't happen for 5 years, well, for 5 years you have nothing else to do than wait for that equity round. Again, it doesn't have any mechanism for conversion outside the price round. They don't have a floor valuation. They don't have the option for reimbursement. They don't have anything. The point of the safe was prepay for shares. Give money now, receive shares in, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, when the startup eventually found a lead investor. Why it was easier and preferable for a startup to use a safe instead of a convertible loan agreement is that in the US, the safe is not a debt instrument. It's not a debt for them. It's an equity instrument. It's a prepayment for shares. On the other hand, a convertible loan agreement is a loan, meaning that it's a liability in the accounting. When you look in the accounting, the loan is a liability. This safe, it's not a liability. Is a promise for the company to give the investor shares at a predefined future event, at a trigger event. The thing is that the safe is an equity instrument only in the US. It's not in Romania. It's still a debt instrument. And it's not in a lot, actually I can clearly say most of the EU jurisdiction, where it's still a debt instrument. In the company's accounting, in the startup's accounting, it shows as a loan because you have no other means to consider it. The ASA, the Advanced Subscription Agreement, it's basically the UK safe. It's not standardized, which is better than the safe. And therefore, it may or may not contain mechanisms for conversion outside the price round. As I was saying, all of this is negotiable with a startup. On the other hand, the safe is a standard. And we have used safes because the companies, the startups, have come to the lead investor with safes and they agreed to do safes. And as you know, we are going with a lead investor. So if the lead investor agrees to something, we assume that he knows what he's doing, and they usually know what they're doing because that's why they're institutional investors. But the ASAs have that place for negotiation of a floor valuation, of reimbursement, or of any other remedies for the investor. Again, the ASA is an equity instrument in the UK. In Romania, it's definitely not an equity instrument. So if a Romanian startup issues safes or ASAs as convertible instruments, it does nothing for them. For them, it's the same as going with a convertible loan agreement. It's only an advantage if you are in UK and use an ASA, or if you're in the US and use a safe. It's still a debt instrument. Now, what I would like to add, and then I think I should stop because we're hitting the
We still have
milestone. We at SeedBlink developed, how should I put it, a safe which was heavily modified by us, and which is actually not a safe anymore. Because when we say safe, we say that it's a standard document. If you go on the website of Y Combinator, you can find it there. It's a standard document. What we did is we didn't really like that safe because it does not contain the maturity date. It does not contain any mechanism whatsoever. And we heavily modified it. And it's almost a convertible loan agreement. And we have used that in a couple of investments, but most of the times it's the lead investor in that round who decides to use the instrument. So we only have a say in what instrument to use when we are lead investors, when there is no lead investor in the round. But when there is a lead investor in the round, they are the one deciding it. For example, the genomics investment is a safe. And the lead investor, which is a VC, an institutional investor, said that, okay, this is fine with us. And we said, okay, this is fine with us too. We're going in the same round. But this is mainly the main differences between these three types of convertible instruments. And now, just to wrap up, just a couple of main takeaways of today's Q&A. So, priced rounds, investors become shareholders. Unpriced rounds, investors are not shareholders yet. They will be, hopefully, in the future. However, they may have some shareholder-specific rights based on a side level. It's not necessarily so. Price rounds have a clear and determined price per share. Unpriced rounds only have the mechanism for determining the price per share. They don't have a price per share. Remember, valuation cap is not the same as valuation. Valuation cap is a means for calculating a future price, is not the price of the company. In the priced round, you pay the money. Now you receive the shares now, straightforward. In the unpriced round, which always relates to a future priced round, means you pay the money now, you receive the shares later, but at a better price, because you have the valuation cap and the discount and maybe an interest, which will accrue, and this all translates into a better price. So who gets earlier gets the bigger risk and gets eventually the best price. And the priced rounds equal equity deals. This is what happened. This is why we call them equity rounds. And in the unpriced rounds, we have the convertible instruments such as convertible loan agreements, safes, ASAs. By the way, convertible loan agreement and convertible note means the same thing from a fundamental point of view. The thing is that the convertible notes are mainly used in the common law jurisdictions where they are quite similar to how they are called with bonds. So the thing is that you have the underlying convertible loan agreement, but the company also issues a certificate, which is called a convertible note, which is basically like a bond. It states that you have given the company this amount, and the company will give you eventually shares according to the convertible loan agreement. So from your perspective, it's the same. When you're hearing convertible loan agreement and convertible note, it's pretty much the same. So this was it with the main takeaways. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I really hope I was clear enough. And if not, please hit me with questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you to Andrei. We have another question in the chat from a member that might have joined a bit later. And I was wondering if you can summarize a bit. And his question is, what happens if maturity is reached and there is no price round? How do you value? I think you covered that, but maybe we
Yes,
can...
but it's not a problem to cover it again. If there is there any other question?
That's the only one for now.
Okay,
So,
that's the only one for now. I will go back. This is the slide, exactly the answer for your question. What if a price round never happens? As I said, in convertible instruments, there are remedies available for the investor. The investor usually has the option of postponing the maturity date. If, for example, the founder says, I'm a couple of days away from signing a term sheet with the lead investor, or you can convert into a floor valuation. The floor valuation is a pre-agreed valuation of the company. In order to get shares, you need price. You need to have a price. You don't have a price until you have a price round. So what do? You put a price in there, a pre-agreed price of the company, at which the conversion takes place if there is no price round until the maturity date. Or there is the not really useful remedy like reimbursement of the amounts. I was saying that it's not really useful because the startups are actually spending the money we're giving to them. So we're not giving them money and expect them to hold on to them until a year later. No, they're spending it. When the maturity date comes, they will most likely have almost nothing left of what we gave them, because this is just how startups work. They rely on investors' money to go ahead and become unicorns.
Good, thank you for coming back to this topic. We received a question whether or not the PowerPoint presentation will be shared, and the answer is yes. We are going to share this presentation, and we are going to also share a more elaborate article that Andrei has already prepared, because this is a large topic and it would have been impossible for us to cover it in only 1 hour. And what I would also like to mention is the fact that Andrei is also very active in our community platform, and he is there in case you have any questions. You just address them in the Let's Discuss channel, and we will be able to tackle them one by one when they pop up. So yes, we are going to have his presentation, the article, and he's always there, I guess, Andrei.
Just a quick thing. I would wait for the article, because this presentation was made in order to also look good. So it's not a lot of information on the slides. I had a lot of information, I talked a lot, but in the article, there will be much more information. I mean, it will be a 3-4 pager with basically everything I said. So I would wait for the article. The presentation is not that useful.
Okay.
But it's good looking, hopefully.
Thank you. Other questions that you might have? We still have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, anything at all.
Good. Well, apparently you have been pretty straightforward, Andrei, and I would like to thank you again for that. I know it hasn't been easy to cover such a complex topic in 1 hour. But as I told you, we are going to come back with a follow-up email and communication. And yes, stay close to that.
I think we have another question right here, which is really interesting, and I really think maybe I forgot to talk about this.
We still have to make.
No, I didn't forget. But no, the question is really good. So what if you invested in an unpriced round and the company gets sold afterwards at a valuation lower than the agreed floor price? At what price will be evaluated the investment? Yeah, no, this is a really good question.
Go ahead.
So the thing is that I don't care about what happens is that in a liquidity event, the liquidity event is something else. It's not the same as the conversion for a floor price. We only convert at the floor price if nothing happens. If there is no equity round and is no liquidity event. If there is a liquidity event, I don't care about the floor price anymore. What I care about is the price of the event. At what price has the company been sold? Let's say 100 euros. I can tell really quickly what's the company valuation. So I go again with the both calculations, valuation cap and discount, whichever is better. And I will see which one is better. If the price is really bad, I'm not expecting to go with the valuation cap, because the valuation cap will be much higher than the valuation of the company at which the exit has been done. So the main thing is that if the price is really, really bad, it's not a good exit. It's a bad exit. If it's a bad exit, you will basically get the discount, and that's it.
Thank you, Andrei.
Thank you so much.
Good. I would suggest to stop here and to continue as I said through the follow-up communication that we are going to prepare this week, or the latest at the beginning of the next one. And thank you again to you for remaining until the end in such a great number. And thank you to Andrei once again for being here with us Maybe we will think of other legal-ish topics to cover in the next community Q&As. But we are going to ask the community what else they would like to know more about. And yeah, I'm sure we will schedule other sessions in the future. Thank you to you all, and have a great evening ahead. And see you at the next sessions. Thank you, Andrei.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.